Pallets can often be a good source of free or cheap lumber. I got really lucky and got these 12 really nice pallets that are made of really good boards. But it turns out that they were quite difficult to take apart. But I did eventually manage to turn those 12 pallets into all this wood you see here. Now I'm going to show you how I did that, but before I do, and before you get started, please do put on some good shoes. You don't want to be stepping on any rusty nails. Now, the first method I'm going to show here is the method that I think is actually probably going to be best for most people with most pallets. It didn't actually end up working for me, I think because these pallets that I have were just so well put together. And because they aren't weathered at all, it's just seemed impossible for this to actually work. But I do think that doing this for most pallets is going to be probably the best method to make sure that none of the boards break and that you get as many boards as possible broken down and taken apart in one piece. Now what you see here is that I have supported these 3 boards here in the center with another strong board, and under that board is 2 bricks holding up that board to lift the whole pallet off the ground. And then using another board, I'm hammering the long left to right board to try to loosen those 3 boards from that board. But in my case, it just didn't really work. So I flipped over my pallet to try to do the same thing, but where there was just one smaller board being held together by 2 nails. And even here, it still did not want to really do it. Now, obviously, I do think that eventually it would actually work. You can see that a little tiny gap is forming between the longer left to right board and the small board here. But it just didn't seem like it was going to be worth it because it was just taking forever and didn't really want to budge much. Now I know this method works because I saw another video on YouTube where a guy took apart an entire pallet in about 10 minutes doing this method. Alright, now on to the method that I actually used. You're going to need some basic tools, nothing crazy though, which is actually pretty good. Now, it's important to understand that I was doing whatever I could to preserve as many boards as possible. I have a project that I want to do using these boards, and I need as many of them intact as possible. So there's no cutting and no intentional breaking of any of these boards. Now, again, I want to reiterate that these pallets that I obtained are really well built, and their integrity is still very much intact. In fact, I think that they were just sitting indoors for their entire lifetime until I got them. Also, I am aware that there are specific tools, one of which is called the Pallet Buster, that are designed specifically for tearing apart pallets. I did not want to spend any money getting any specific tools, so I'm just using what you see here. Just pretty basic heavy-duty mallet and a crowbar that lends itself to this type of thing. And I'm just utilizing other boards that I have as needed. So as you can see, this method is working really well, especially for these the medium-sized boards here. There's 3 different sized boards on this pallet, and for my own usage, I started referring to them as A, B, and C. The A board is the longest board that's running bottom to top in this image here. There's 3 of those. And then the medium size are the ones that I just removed. Those I referred to as B, and then the smaller size, the ones that are on the top of the pallet in this image, I referred to those as C. So once again, safety precaution here. Make sure you do what you feel comfortable with. For me, I wanted to even remove these and turn them with the nails facing down, just so there's no chance of me stepping on them or putting my hand down on them or anything. Now I'm going to flip the pallet over here and do the same method to remove these smaller boards, but this is when things do not always go according to plan. Because these boards are thinner, they're more fragile, and occasionally they have knots in them or they already have cracks in them or something, even though these boards are not weathered. These smaller, thinner boards are still more fragile, and so hammering them like this oftentimes is going to chip them or even just totally break them. Now, in this example, in this particular pallet, it's sort of like a best case scenario. These boards, although they broke on some of the other pallets, on this pallet specifically, they actually did pretty well. And I was able to get these off in one piece. So just keep in mind that if you don't need these specific boards on your pallet, then you can just hit them as hard as you want, break them off, do whatever you can to get them off, or even cut them off. I'm just showing what I had to do so that you have an idea of what you might have to do if you want all and as many of the boards on your pallets intact as possible. Here I'm just showing removing some of the nails that did not come off with the C boards. They just sort of break through the C board because the C board is so thin. Now, the method that I found that was the best for getting off the C boards that are directly under, or in this image above, the B boards is to use the power of leverage, as you can see. And then best case scenario here is that I am able to pull up the nails just enough to then hammer down the board back down so that the nails stay up and the board goes down, and then I'm able to pry them out with a crowbar like this. This did not always happen like this, didn't always go according to plan. Like I said, this is best case scenario. Oftentimes the board would crack and then I'd have to use the crowbar to get underneath the board and pry up the nail. But quite a few times this did happen and I was able to pull the nails out and then get the board out. Now I'm leaving all of this footage in because I want you to just have an idea of how finicky it can be to get these smaller boards off. So if you end up having to do something like this, just be aware that it can be kind of annoying. And this part is actually probably the second most time consuming. And like I said before, on this particular pallet, these boards actually went pretty well. Removing them went pretty well. On other pallets, they broke or cracked or just were not as easy to get off as these were. But even here, like you see, there is a small crack. And once you have those boards removed, you just remove the nails, and then you can just hammer out these final 2 medium-sized boards, or whatever it is in your case, if you don't have a pallet just like this. And then you can move on to the most tedious and potentially time-consuming part of the whole thing. Now, there are multiple ways to get nails out of the medium-sized boards. You could just cut them off. I wanted these boards to be as intact as possible, and I don't want there to be nails in any part of these boards because I might end up cutting through them or screwing a screw into them or something. So I just wanted to get every single nail out, which for the most part isn't too difficult. It just consists of hammering the pointed part until the head of the nail comes up out of the wood, and then you can just pry it out. Now, this didn't always go to plan. Every once in a while, a nail would bend before the head would break through. And initially, I thought that this was going to be potentially a really annoying problem, but in the end, it actually ended up not being that difficult to fix. There is also a tool that is designed to remove nails like this, and I don't know exactly what it's called, but it uses a piston, and you kind of just slide the end of this tool over the nail, and then you pull the trigger and a piston shoots out at a really high rapid speed and just knocks that nail out. But again, that would be another tool that I would have had to purchase, but if you have that tool or if you want to purchase it, then that would probably make this easier than what I'm doing here. And one other option is to just use bolt cutters or some other tool that can cut through these nails and cut them about halfway down, and then you're less likely to have a nail that bends, which actually is what I ended up doing for the nails that did bend for me. But it turned out only about 9 or 10 nails bent, and there's like 1,000 that I had to do this to, so I would say it's not really worth spending all the time to cut all of them in half just to avoid the 9 or 10 that are going to actually bend. And that was just for my case. Could be different for you. And here is one of those nails that bent on me, and I'm trying to hold them with some pliers to keep them from bending again. Which actually did work a couple of times on a couple of nails, but on most of the ones that bent, this was not able to add enough support to the nail. And so I just, like I said, I ended up later just using some bolt cutters, cutting off half of them and then knocking that out, which you'll see later. But it did actually make it quite easy. So I actually spent way more time than I needed to trying to get these out by holding them with these pliers, when I should have just moved on and then just later come back like I ended up doing anyway, using the bolt cutters and knocking them out really easily. So, was it all worth it? In my case specifically, it was very much worth it. I was able to get about 36 of these, the longest boards. These are about 1.6 meters long. And then I was able to get about 80 or so of the medium-sized boards, and these are about 1.1 meters long. Those three wider ones in the middle there were just on one of the pallets instead of the smaller ones. And of course, some of these middle ones did have those nails sticking out, and here's some images of those. But again, I was able to get that out pretty easily. And as for the smallest boards, I was able to get about 48 in total of those, but some of them are broken, and here's an image of the cracked or broken ones. And then, as I said, here is just a demonstration of how easy it is to use the bolt cutters to make those nails that were stubborn more easy to come out. So in total, this is around $700 worth of lumber. So for me, the amount of time that it took me to do this, that $700 saved is well worth it. So I hope that this was beneficial in some way. I know that it was a struggle for me in the beginning, trying to figure out the best way to get these pallets broken down. I had broken down pallets before, but none that were quite this well built and quite as new and unweathered as these were. So if that's something that you are trying to do, I hope that you found some methods that you might want to try in this video. If you did use any of these methods or you found some better ones that worked for you, please let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any that I can in the comments as well.